Gordon Chang, a columnist at Forbes.com and author of The Nuclear Showdown and the Coming Collapse of China, is on the line here with us. We thought a good day to have him, given all that's been going on with China and the fact that Joe Biden is headed to Tokyo and then to China to try to diffuse the tension in that particular part of the region. Gordon, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
All right, so here's what's going on. They have expanded their authority of the airspace over a large portion of the South China Sea, the Chinese have, and they've said, listen, you don't fly through here unless you notify us and you fly the proper flight plans. We now control this airspace. The Japanese reject that. The United States rejects it. They sent B-52s right through it to see what would happen, and not much did happen. So what's going on with this particular venture by the Chinese? What are they up to?
Well, the Chinese want to control their borders, and what they're doing with these ADIZ rules is really unprecedented in the sense that their rules are much more restrictive than you see in other air defense zones around the world, including ours. Plus, the Chinese zone includes the sovereign airspace of South Korea as well as the sovereign airspace of Japan. That's what makes this so provocative.
And so do we understand why they're doing this? What's the motivation to do this now?
Well, I think the motivation right now is that there is distress in the regime in Beijing. New leader Xi Jinping has not consolidated control, and I think he created this confrontation for that very purpose because the People's Liberation Army is now the most powerful faction in the Communist Party, and you've got some pretty nationalistic generals and admirals who are driving policies. The Chinese want territory controlled by other nations from India in the south to South Korea in the north, and this is part of that very belligerent initiative.
And apparently, Gordon Chang, the American airlines who fly to the area have been advised by the U.S. government to comply with these demands. Is that a capitulation from Washington, or is that just wise advice until this thing gets sorted out?
Well, we do not want to put our airlines at risk. And we did say that when we notified the airlines that they should comply with China, that the United States does not agree with China's rules. But this was a mistake, because what we should have advised our airlines to do, matter of fact, we should have required them to do, is to stay out of China's ADIZ, or Air Defense Identification Zone. And the reason is that there's a lot of trouble with planes flying in very close proximity in the ADIZ. It's a dangerous place. We should have gotten our airlines out of it entirely, unless, of course, they were heading into China.
I have heard that it said that the Chinese may have backed themselves into a corner with this, and they're looking for a way to get out of that. Is that your sense?
Well, I think that they miscalculated, and they start to understand that because they thought actually everyone would comply. But they are not in a position where they can really back down because their government right now, its legitimacy is dependent on nationalism, and that's primary basis of legitimacy. So for them to back down would be very humiliating for the Communist Party, and that's why the party has been really censoring news about China's failure to enforce its rules in the new air defense zone.
Big picture, though, the Chinese military has been growing. They've been putting a lot of money into it. They have an aircraft carrier now where they've never had that before. They are becoming more militarily adventurous across the board, but it seems hard to figure out exactly what their strategy is.
Well, their strategy is to take on everyone at the same time, which is basically a failure of strategy. And that shows that something's really going on in Beijing. China is lashing out. This is not a good sign. And I think that it shows troubles deep inside China itself, which means that when Vice President Biden goes to Beijing, this is mission almost impossible because, yeah, he can talk to them, but they're not going to really be listening.
Well, and Gordon Chang is our guest. He's a columnist at Forbes.com and author of the book The Coming Collapse of China, which, by the way, you wrote in 2001. When is it coming?
Well, I said in that book that it would take 10 years, so I'm 2 years out of date. But right now, we see China in very much distress. The economy's not growing as they claim it is. You've got these problems now. You've got riots and demonstrations and insurrections inside. This is a very troubled country right now.
Well, and given that, the Obama administration has spent pretty much the last couple of years focusing on Pakistan, on the Arab Spring, now on Iran, of course, which is grabbing a lot of the headlines. Have they pretty much been ignoring China?
No, they have actually, with the pivot, which is actually more than its critics believe, they have been paying more attention. But it was wrong for President Obama to skip those two meetings a couple of months ago. I mean, he claimed it was because of sequestration, shutdown of the government. But that was wrong because that really hurt American interests in the region. And I think that because of partisan politics, the United States really has suffered. And I think that was a mistake.
You know, I was in China when this Beau Xilai thing started to break, and it was amazing to me that you couldn't find out anything. I mean, in American hotel, where Americans stay in hotels, you can generally get the internet and you can get access to most stories, but the entire internet was absolutely shut down for a few days there. Is that a common thing?
Well, it's not common that they shut it down entirely, but they all the time make sure that certain stories are not permitted to be viewed. And that really is a problem because the Chinese are not morons. They know what's going on. With Beau Xilai, everybody knew that the Communist Party was having problems with its once most ambitious politician who was put on a show trial. This is not a good story for the party because people understand what's going on, and yet the party tries to prevent them. And so no one wants to be treated like an infant.
All right, Gordon Chang, thank you so much. Good stuff.
Thank you.